The Journey of Sir Alberich Lichten. Day 1. My wife has told me to keep a written record of my travels since, quote, my memory is bad enough regarding breakfast, let alone a several-week-long journey. She's right, of course, but I couldn't let her know that, so I begrudgingly told her I would grab one of those unterrible journals from the little magic shop down the road before I set out for my journey abroad. Pietro told me that magic bookstores are very strange to him, but there are tons back in Therelos, though I suppose it makes sense as they don't allow much in the way of magic items in his home city of Bethmid. But I digress. I suppose I should give this a proper beginning. This is the journal of Sir Alberich Lichten, ex-colonel of the Iron Dog Battalion of the Empire of Senra, chronicling me and my party's expedition to the wilds of the island of Zalasif. We are in search of a rumored artifact called Krizkathustra, more commonly referred to as String of Infinity, and how I will be calling it for the rest of this journal, as the former spelling is not easy. Tales of this artifact are often mentioned within old legends as something as part of a grander machine that could make anything out of nothing. To be perfectly honest, I don't believe it's real. This expedition is more just an excuse to get these old bones motivated and striving to achieve something more before they become immobilized by age entirely. I know it will be perilous, as do the companions I have decided to bring along with me, but each of us need this trip in our own way. The island of Zalasif is very unknown, as it has always been told to be a place of great evil, a land where malice flourishes and full of abominations that even demons fear. But I'm not decrepit yet. I've pushed further into the dark lands of Kelligith more than any other soldier or general from the Empire. I've defeated Driders and Yuan-Ti and Lizard Folk and many other vile abominations found on the mainland. I've led armies to slay dragons and fought back an entire invading merfolk army. This island of heat, spider webs, and stories will not harass my senses any more than a late breakfast would. I simply will not allow it to do so. The journey to Port Jericho was mundane enough to not really note anything down in this journal. Just a couple of carriage rides and the odd beggar proved to be my only obstacles. And 3 days after leaving home, I arrived at my destination. The port town of Mithnor was very beautiful, clearly a place that valued aesthetics very highly. Unfortunately, I was to only have about an hour of free time before I was to meet my compatriots at the docks. An hour that I spent simply soaking in the atmosphere of the market square. I got myself a small sweet cake and one of the local special teas, as has always been a tradition of mine when in a new place. And once the hour had ended, I set off towards the dockyard. We all gathered at approximately 11 a.m. Excluding the ship's crew, there were to be 5 of us. Pietro, a half-elven master in alchemy and herbology, desperate to find ways to help heal the rampant diseases that often spread through his home country of Dustwich like wildfire. He's very average-looking for a son of the Empire. Dirty blonde hair, green eyes, soft complexion, and a tattoo on the back of his neck denoting his education. His pale skin and thin, short frame portray his tendency for the betterment of his mind rather than for his body. However, I'm not so close-minded to assume that any lifestyle dissimilar to mine is immediately without worth, though sometimes I do wonder that should the wind pick up too much, I will never be able to find him again. I met him a good few years back in a tavern, me telling stories of my triumphs and him telling stories of the triumphs he wished to accomplish. I promised him if I ever had any potential glory to nudge him towards, I would do so. And, well, now here we are. Lichten always keeps their promise, especially one made to their favorite drinking partner. Then there's Ordon, a high elf that is about as snooty as they come. A very temperamental but incredibly astute scholar of the arcane arts. It is true his magical talents seemed to outweigh his pitfalls and personality, though with how often he likes to state that fact, I'm unsure how long it will remain the case. He says he's doing this as his senior project of sorts. I am unsure of what that means, as I never went to Fazthul's College of the Arcane. But apparently all students must apply their trade and go out into the real world to test themselves. Those that report back to their professor with tales of adventure are awarded with a passing grade in graduation. Those that don't come back, well, apparently there's only two ways you don't go back. Either you abandon the college altogether, or you forfeit your life on your adventure. Why anyone would ever subject themselves to a test like that for a simple degree is beyond me, but it makes sense that someone as bold as brass like Ordon would fit very well in that sort of environment. There is Helrica, the only other human on this journey with me. A bit on the taller side for a human female, stands just under 6 foot. Her hair is soft brown and very curly, often with various white twigs stuck in to hold certain areas in place. She's got darker skin. I assume she's from the wild northern forests of Laurasia. She was a nature enthusiast, similar to Pietro, though her skills were more, shall we say, druidic than Pietro's were. She's a very sweet girl, though her and Ordon butt heads almost constantly. Though, I'll admit, it's nice to be able to scold misbehaving young folk again since my children moved out of the house many, many years ago. I believe she has chosen to join me simply for the love of adventure, which I respect greatly. I see the way her and Pietro look at one another, though, and I've made it a sub-priority to see if I can have them end this whole trip as a couple. Then there is the halfling, Adelaine, who is very strange indeed. She doesn't talk much, and she has yet to reveal her intentions of visiting this island yet, but I suppose that isn't necessary to join us. While I don't know much about her personal life, I've seen her in combat, and she is one of the most capable I have ever seen. She's nice enough, though, very well-mannered and very quick with her dry humor. She reminds me of my son in a lot of ways. And finally, me, of course, Sir Alberich Lichten. I hesitate to call myself the leader of this little expedition, though seeing as I am the one financing everything, my experience commanding armies, and my age, I will be referring to myself as such. We boarded the ship called the Eyeful, captained by one Admiral Dupont, a well-respected admiral of the Empire, and a man I had found myself in a competition of kills with during the aforementioned invasion of merfolk. I had nothing but respect for this man as a captain, and nothing but love for him as a fellow child of the Empire. I had gotten into contact with the Admiral about 5 months ago now, asking how he was doing. I had heard about a skirmish with the Nelkozar Navy that the Empire had engaged in, and it apparently went a bit poorly for us. I had no doubt in my mind that he had long since retired, same as I, but apparently I was wrong. I had mailed him a letter offering condolences if any of his underlings had been a part of the dreadful affair, and he sent me back a small novel's worth of detail on what all had happened. I suppose with me being an ex-colonel, he felt no fear in sharing military details with me, as he knew the secrets were safe. Apparently, he had been a part of the whole thing, still an admiral, and he went on a whole long tirade about the monstrous sea creature that was on the side of the Nel Khazar navy that basically carried them to a decisive victory. Admiral Dupont had been blown off the side of his ship and was later rescued and brought back to the naval headquarters in Walegira, where he explained everything. Even through his writing, I could tell he feels an unending amount of shame for not having died in that battle. But to that, I told him I had another mission for him. He would still be on medical leave by the time we departed, but I knew he was itching to get back to the sea, so he agreed immediately, even sounding ecstatic at the idea of braving waters not often sailed. He told me he still had a vessel that was his, definitely big enough for our crew, and certainly fast enough to not dampen anyone's excitement about the prospects of new knowledge and lands. We departed at noon sharp. The Admiral and I made sure of it, and luckily the young ones were able to keep up. I feel this will be a good adventure. The sea was something I had never been on, and neither had most of my companions. I'm proud to say it had very little effect on me in terms of seasickness, though I could hardly say the same for my new companions. Unfortunately, I write this now late at night, as falling asleep in these stiff old bunks is proving a bit much for my old bones. I'm sure I'll get used to it eventually. It's been another hour of sleepless rocking, so I've gone back up to the deck of the ship to look at the stars. I must say, this journal was a brilliant idea. I never took myself to be a writer, but I was always one for a good story. And this journal here proves useful for codifying the prose I often think in. However, I must also give praise to Pietro. Tonight, during mealtime, he finished his food early and treated everyone there to a few songs on his violin, ending everything with a poem he wrote. No doubt he did so in an attempt to impress Alberich, and impressed she was. The violins were all relatively standard dust-witch affair, but the poems he spoke were certainly his own, speaking on the pains of uncertain futures and the wherewithal to understand that no matter what he might end up facing, he will be forced to endure and end up stronger on the other side. I quite like Pietro. I think I'll try to sleep again.